Today we're back with the next in our Artist Spotlight series. We're taking a look at the art of the legendary David Trampier. This is going to be a great one, folks. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and this is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. On the Artist Spotlight series, we take a look at the work of a particular artist from the early era of Dungeons & Dragons. And no one is more central to the look and feel of that early era than this man, David Trampier. If you're not familiar with his work, which dominates the pages of those AD&D hardback books from the late 70s, as well as a number of other products, you are in for a real treat. His art is fantastic, and it's the art I think most people who played in this era remember with great fondness from the early days of their gaming. We hope you enjoy today's video. I'm so excited to share the art of David Trampier with you all today. He's absolutely one of my favorite artists. Image after image after image of his that I spent time looking at when I was a kid. If you were like me, the images, the art, not only did they define in the monster manual what these fantastic creatures looked like, but their images and their scenes really created a sense of what the game was all about. I put off doing the Trampier video for a while because I wanted to make sure I could do it justice. I really wanted to make sure I captured everything that he had done. I did try to do as much research as I could. I'll tell you in advance, there probably are a couple of mistakes in here. Either A, I've omitted a piece of art or two of his because I wasn't able to confirm that it was his, I just thought it was his. Or on the flip side, I may have included a piece of art or two in here that is not his. You know, most of his art is signed either with his initials or his name. It's kind of a fun game when you look through these old books to find his signature or his initials, because sometimes he sort of hides it inside the art. So there were a few cases where the art looks so much stylistically like his that I thought it had to be. I've included it, but I couldn't find those initials, so I'm not positive it's his, and so I apologize in advance if I make a mistake or two. Let's get into the art. So Trampier's first appearance, as far as I can tell, was not in those original wood grain white box booklets, but comes here when they released the Holmes Basic set. It's a couple pieces of art, frankly not awesome, but he really finds his stride as he moves forward into these hardbound AD&D books. The Monster Manual, he and Dave Sutherland did almost all the art, not all of it, but gosh, I didn't do the math. 80–90% probably of the art in this book was done by those two guys. The Player's Handbook, he does quite a bit of the interior illustration in this one, and he does a number of interior illustrations in the Dungeon Master's Guide as well. You know, those two books, unlike the Monster Manual, were not full of illustrations. There was a lot of text in there, but every once in a while there's a little sprinkling of art inside the book, and that really, I think, was memorable for me as a kid. He's credited with being an artist in the Deities and Demigods book, and this is one that was really hard for me. He leaves right at this time, and if you remember the artists who did a lot of the interior illustrations in here, he's gone when those folks come in. People like Willingham, I think he was gone before Errol Otis was there. I know he was gone before Jeff D got there. I'm not sure if Roslov had any crossover with him. I think Roslov did. And he's also involved in the early era of the modules, so what we call the monochrome modules. And so here are covers. Sutherland did most of the covers in this era, but this one was done by Tramp. But he did a lot of interior art for this. Trampier does this one as well. And then remember, these early era ones get repackaged, and some of his art shows up in there. So this is D12, D3, G123. So mostly these are the monochrome early era modules. When they get re-released, some of his art stays in there. He did a little bit of work in the accessories. There's the Dungeon Master screen, and there's this Monster and Treasure assortment. I think principally are the things where his art showed up. Okay, so let's look at Holmes Basic. He has, I think just 2 illustrations in here. This is the web spell. It's in the spell section, and his wizard is cast a spell on whatever this creature is here on the ground. And then he's got this scene a sort of corpulent minotaur fighting a fighter here. Now, the monster manual. I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning. This video is going to be long because there's so much art and I want us to enjoy all of it. So in fact, what I'm going to do is get myself out of the way and let you all take a look at the book and the art without me covering it up. I take my look at the art from the monster manual. I basically went through an alphabetical order. We start here with the axe beak, which is obviously letter A, the basilisk, the crocodile, the centaur. So many of these are just awesome. There's the carnivorous ape. I don't know if I'm saying this right. The creature on the right, the catabalipus, and the coatl. And then I'm pretty sure he did all of, or almost all of the art here in the devil section. If I understand correctly from where I've listened to folks who were around back in the time talk about this, the artist basically grabbed a letter, more or less, and just worked. And then, you know, when you got finished, you sort of said, where are we now in the book? And you sort of took the next chunk, whatever that was. And so I think generally these things came in clumps. Some of these obviously do have his initials in them, others do not. But just from a stylistic point of view, I think he did all of these figures that are shown here in the devil section. Everyone from the top of the line, Asmodeus, down to the little lemurs at the bottom of the chain. His pit fiend here, and then as we continue into the D's and into the E's, he's got the displacer beast, the Afridi, the Djinni, the dragon, and the dragon turtle, as well as a little scenic picture at the bottom of the elves. You know, one of the things that strikes me about Trampier's art, it's particularly like you notice down here in this elven scene, some of his art really looks almost like a wood carving. If you look back to that form of art that was popular quite a while earlier, of sort of etching into wood and then making prints, I always get the impression that his art feels like that. Again, I think he did all of the giants. They're not all signed, but just based on my understanding of sort of how they got assigned out, I think these are all his. I know most of them are. We've got a hill giant, stone giant, frost giant, fire giant, storm giant, and cloud giant. And then there's this scene. I'm really not sure about this little scene in the middle of the page of the castle in the clouds, whether that's his, but it was in his section, so I included it. Again, that one might be a mistake. And then we've got the flesh golem, as well as the little scene of the flesh golem whacking this guy from behind down here at the bottom. Moving on into the G's, we've got one of my favorites, and I should say at the end, like I normally do in these videos, I've got my five top illustrations and covers at the end, so we'll get to those in a little bit. The goblin almost made it. This is really one of my favorites for sure. I don't know, for whatever reason, I just always thought this goblin was great. We've got the Gorgon down below him. These two, I couldn't find the initials for the gray ooze and the green slime, but they're in amongst stuff that he did, and I think they are his as well. We have the groaning spirit, the harpy, one of my favorite creatures, the homunculus, and the hellhound. And then we move over into the eyes with the imp, the intellect devourer, the Kirin, the Lamassu, Lakota, this lich, which is also super famous. I think that's on t-shirts and a bunch of other stuff, so it's one of the most famous images from the early era. Didn't quite make my cut, but super memorable for sure. The lizard man, that's another one of my favorites, and then the Lokatha. Then he did, I think, all of the were creatures. I don't know that this one of the were wolf is signed by him, and it does actually look a little bit like a David Sutherland drawing, so maybe it's mixed in. I'm not positive. But we've got the were bear, the were boar, the were rat, and the were tiger. Then we move into the M's. Not positive about this mastodon. Again, it's clustered in among his stuff and sort of feels like his, but I'm not positive if that one's his. We've got the mummy, the pixie, the Medusa, the Minotaur, the Rakasa, and the Remoraz. These are some amazing drawings, amazing creatures, and I think, I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I spent hours and hours looking at these books when I was a kid. Okay, we've got the salamander, the satyr, the shrieker. This one is great, this little duck creature, the thought eater, and the treant. And here's a little piece of trivia, if you like that kind of thing. Which illustration of his shows up in more than one book? And the answer is the satyr down here at the bottom, and you'll see it again here in a second. The vampire, giant wasp, the white, and the wyvern. Again, I think that vampire is fantastic. He's super scary. That white was always sort of something that freaked me out. I just think his illustrations are fantastic. Then in the player's handbook, he has, again, a bunch of interior illustrations, more like little vignettes or scenes, I guess I would call them. There's the Catablos, people fighting with it. They should be running away like the guy on the top is, because they're going to get killed. That creature's tough to defeat, and these guys do not look like they have much in the way of experience. You've got these little dwarves in the mine, the thief here at the bottom. This spell, I'm not sure. This comes from a spell, this little chest. That one's not labeled, so I just think it's his, but I'm not positive about that. The same thing with the sort of fire trap image. The style of that feels like it's Trampier to me, but it's not labeled. Then there's a number of just little pieces of art that are inset among the pages. We've got this guy sharpening the axe. I think this is probably a demon. The giant toad that's going to eat the little pixie guy. Again, that one's not labeled, so I'm not positive that that's Trampier and not Sutherland, but just I'm taking a guess on that one. We've got the dagger getting poison put onto it, these guys in the bar, and this one I really love down here at the bottom, which is the troll with the piece of string and the fighters sort of following the string, getting closer to the end. Further back in the book, you've got this scene, and I don't know if you all have seen, there is one, I think, maybe only one photograph of David Trampier, which is the photograph someone took. If you all don't know his story, he sort of just disappeared, like sort of just left. I've never heard any clear details about why, if there was something personal or something at TSR that caused him to leave. And just completely disappeared, and some guy ran into him, I think in Chicago, driving a taxi, and somehow recognized him or realized who he was, and talked to him a little bit. Somehow they got a picture of him, and he was rediscovered. And so, for me, one of the saddest things about Trampier is that he was so beloved by the entire community, and I'm not sure he ever really knew how valued his art was, how much he was appreciated by the community, and what the high esteem that he was held in as an artist. But so I'm told, and if you look at that photograph of him when he was a taxi driver, that this is a little bit of self-portraiture here, with the guy turned back who's holding the torch is a little bit maybe drawn by Trampier to look like himself. We've got this little scene down here at the bottom of the guy's sort of an astral plane, I believe, and then this really rough looking drawing of which the magic mouth. I couldn't find his signature in this piece of art, the one on the right, but I also think that's his just based on the style of the drawing. Okay, so next we have the Dungeon Master's Guide, and he did a few pieces of artwork in here. This one was one of my favorites. That didn't quite make the top 5 list, is this dragon and the kobolds. Certainly in Trampier's mind, the kobolds were not little miniature dragon men. There's no affinity there. This dragon is roasting them and killing them. I love the drawing at the bottom with the sword and the snake wrapped around it. That just feels like a great, sort of thing you would come upon in a dungeon. And then, as I mentioned, the satyr makes a reappearance. I think he's back in the Wandering Monster tables. We've got some more scenes from the back part of that book. you've got the, my favorite one is probably, well, I don't know, I like all these scenes. I'm blocking the scene a little bit, so let me get out of the way. I love this, I think it's Ankeg, who's popped up and he's chasing this guy who's running away. And I don't know about you, but I'm not the only one I know who said this guy's hat looks like a giant ear or proboscis coming out of that haystack. And for the longest time, I didn't realize that that was the hat that had fallen off this farmer as he's running away. So whatever that says about me and my powers of observation, so be it. And then I also love the displacer beast here at the bottom getting eaten by these dogs. For whatever reason, I've always had the impression these were blink dogs, but maybe I'm wrong about that. So for me, the most troubling thing to share with you all is the Deities and Demigods book, because I don't find anything in this book that is clearly Trampier's work that has a label on it or a signature like I'm used to. I know he didn't do much. I know I'm not identifying everything he did in this book. I've got this piece of art here only because I've seen someone else talk about his work and talk about this particular piece being his. So I hope I'm right about that. Like I said, it's not signed. I don't see his initials in it. And I've looked trying to find it. I couldn't find his initials in any other art in this book. So hopefully someone's going to see this video. In the comments down below, you tell me what pieces of art I've missed. What would be most helpful is if you can give me the book, send me to the page, or give me the name of whatever it is that I've missed, and we'll find it. Okay, so let's talk about his work in the modules. As I mentioned, he's got art inside all of these monochrome modules. Mostly it's him and Sutherland who do the art at this era. And then when they switch over, some of his art stays in there. So let's take a look at it. This is his art from the D1. I'm not positive the Mind Flayer is his. This is just based on the style. It has that wood engraving look to it. So I think that's his. I know the other two are because they're marked. We've got the bugbears, which I love. Clearly he did not follow the idea of the pumpkinhead bugbears, and this becomes the sort of more traditional look of the bugbears in the game. And at the bottom he's got this scene with the gargoyles. And then when we move on to D2, this is a fantastic drawing at the top. Not necessarily, in my view, his typical style. It looks there's an Umber Hulk coming through the wall after these two adventurers. And then we've just got a scene up here on the top. I don't think this one sticks around, so you may not be familiar with the one on the top right. I think that was in the monochromatic version of D2, but was not, and when they recreated it as D1-2, I don't think that artwork survives. And then we've got this scene at the bottom, both of these scenes really, of the creatures that you're going to meet when you get into that module. Then we have D3, Vault of the Drow, and again, I don't think all of this art survives when they republish it. In particular, I don't think the one on the top left is in the later module. And we've got this picture of the carving at the front of this boat, and this sort of really more of an icon of Loth or Loth here on the top right picture. Then these are in D3 when it's re-released. This is a scene, it feels like it's rain. It's just interesting how you use just black and white, and to me at least it looks like a torrential downpour. And then this is the rear cover of the monochromatic version of D3. So that does not stick around when they re-release it. But so you may not be as familiar with that art, and I want to make sure I shared it with you guys. I think what we've got here, the adventurers are on the left, and I think the people on the right are actually going to be the drow that they're confronting. He did the cover of G2 in the Giant series back when they were released separately, and this drawing's also in the interior cover for that module. Okay, so then when we're looking at the interior of the Giant series, this is from G1. I love this lady with the frying pan. I think she's awesome. And here's the interior, the cover drawing, also replicated in the interior cover. This is I think that's a Remoras, if I'm not mistaken, up close. It's a fantastic creature. I'm pretty sure that creature was created by Errol Otis in response to a competition. And then here's a piece of interior art from the G series. I do not believe this piece of the sort of table setting with the stuff on the walls, I don't think that survives into the G123 version of that module, so maybe a little bit less popular for folks. Then this art, which you'll recognize from the monster manuals, also in the back of when they did the Giant series separately, G3, he had this full size, the size of a 8.5 by 11 illustration with the red rather than black tone. We've got this trunk, which again I'm pretty sure is his, but I don't believe I found his initials on this drawing. And then he's got these trolls, which are pretty awesome. Okay, the next thing he did was, if you remember, the Tomb of Horrors, this is S1, had both a module booklet that had what was in the rooms, and it had a whole booklet that was just illustrations, and he did a number of these illustrations, which if you've ever been through the Tomb of Horrors, these illustrations were really memorable. So here's a long hallway. You come in at the very beginning, and I won't give any of that away for people that don't know the module that well, but there's a number of traps and tricks right here in this very first illustration. So here's this really famous picture of the open mouth that your characters may be tempted to go into, and this is a really famous image from that dungeon. And here's I believe that's a gargoyle, might be a demon. And he's got a number of other great illustrations in here. The chest full of snakes, this spike trap, this, hey look, that gem, that surely is not a trap. You should definitely go pick that up. And then finally, just an illustration of this room. And then a couple other illustrations from the module. And here are the last two. Lots of great illustration detail. Like I said, his illustrations did a great job of really bringing the feel of these modules to life. And finally, let's talk about the village of Hamlet. He had the cover and the interior cover, and then he did some illustrations inside of that. There's a little farm scene, if you remember the village is important, and then there's this tower that comes into play. And if you haven't done it, this is called the Moat House. It's a really central part of the Village of Hamlet adventure. And there's this little scene of some rats. This is the rear cover to T1, back when it was a mono chromatic module. And then here's your special bonus. If you're not familiar with this, you're probably not alone. This sort of wood carving looking illustration, as I understand it, comes from a very early version of B2, and then they re-edited the module a little bit. They changed some of the artwork, and so then this art is never seen again. It was just like filler art in between some text, but I think it's fantastic. And if you've never seen it before, get yourself a copy of this version of B2 so you can have this artwork. It's fantastic. Okay, so I mentioned he had some work in the accessories. The Dungeon Master screen, initially the front cover was plain, and they add some Errol Otis art. But his art was in both versions of that, and then we have the Monster and Treasure assortment. So he did a couple of illustrations of a Manticore early on, and I'm told, again, no initials, I can't know for sure, but I've read that this was Trampier's art as well. All right, if you've stuck around, let me count down my top 5 illustrations and covers, and let's see how these rank with what you would, where you would put yours. This is number 5 for me. I think it's fantastic. I think all his art really is fantastic. Some of it's just a little more fantastic than others. So this is a giant spider. I love this one. It's in the monster manual. I love this one. It's full page. These guys are walking along. This feels to me like a fantastic Dungeons and Dragons scene that your characters could come upon in their own game, right? Hey, look, there's webs. These guys are talking about them. The fighter's thinking about cutting them. The dwarf's getting ready. And then right off the edge, right on the right, is this guy who shows up, and he's like, hey, see the finger? Like, look up there. There's a giant spider. It's going to jump down on your head and eat you. Anyways, I think this one's great. All right, number 4. This is just one of the monsters from the monster manual, and I've seen this piece of art apparently survived, and I can't remember who, but I know one of the collectors in our community owns this piece of art. It's not particularly big. This is the pseudo dragon. I mean, I think in some respects, here's a fun game to play, right? You go back to the monster manual, or maybe you go back and watch this video over again. If you could have one piece of Tramp's art, right, what would it be? This one might be on the list for me, for sure. I just think it's small, but it's really well detailed, and I just think it's awesome. So here's another piece of his art. This one, obviously very famous. This is from the Dungeon Master's Guide. And this is a Miracle the Chaotic. And I've seen pictures on Facebook. People like to post that this is basically a real street somewhere in Europe. And you know, you can stand at this spot, take the picture, and you're like, yep, Trampier either had been there or had a picture of this somehow, and used that when he drew up this piece of art. I love the magic users, like, you know, it's like he's got the zap spell, which apparently sets people on fire. It's a really great, very detailed piece of art. Here's one of my favorites. This is the interior cover from the player's handbook. If you take a close look at this one, right, this guy is sort of Gandalf-like wizard smoking his pipe. He's sitting on a die, right? So you guys probably noticed the pips on there. He's sitting on a D6. He's reading a book. If you zoom in and look closely on the back cover, he has put in there the words AD&D. So I just love this art. It's really, really good. And then finally, this is probably my favorite. This is also from the Monster Manual. It's back in the back, I think, where they had the treasure tables. And here are these guys. You know, the thief has got the chest opened, the lights coming out. You can see, and especially the guy in the front, his eyes, like how excited / greedy he is with the anticipation of getting his hands on that treasure. Probably should have looked around the side of the chest and noticed the dead people laying there. Maybe that would have given him a better warning. I don't know. But in any event, this is just a great, great piece of art. Okay, so now let's take a look at my top 5 covers. And let me get out of the way because I'm going to show you guys something here. So this is the cover for the monochromatic B1 in Search of the Unknown. Look in the bottom corner. It says Dis and Dat, D-I-S-D-A-T. So I understand the story, and the signatures bear this out. This is a sort of a combination cover where the background was Trampier's. And Dave Sutherland has sort of played around with that a little bit, and then he has drawn in the party members, so the fighter, the wizard, etc., that are here, and I think those are Sutherland. So this is like the only, to my knowledge, the only cover on any of the adventure modules that is actually a combination of 2 of our famous artists. And if you look here, this is the sketch of Trampier's with his initials on the bottom, and you can see his adventures, which were a little more, I don't say goofy, but cartoonish, right? So let's go back, take another look. So this is, I think, Trampier's version before Sutherland puts the let's say more realistic heroes on top. Number 4 in my list of covers, this is actually the rear cover from the monochromatic G3 Fire Giant series. I like the red. I like the people getting on the griffins, or hippogriffs, whatever those are. I just think it's a really good drawing. This is my number 3. This is from the original version of T1 Village of Hamlet. Some people say it's too chaotic, and I used to feel that way, but now that I look at it more closely and slowly, I really like what he's got. He's got the, you know, that adventure deals with a group of, there's like a chaotic sect, right? So he's got the sect down here. He's got the moat house in the back, which is really important. He's got the main bad guy up here who dominates the scene, and then he's got this little crab like creature down here in the front. So to me, it ties together. It ties together. I like it. Okay, here's number 2. This is the Dungeon Master screen for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and he did the art that would be shown towards the players when the Dungeon Master had his Dungeon Master screen up. I just think this is fantastic. You got the dragon in the background. There's a lot to look at here. Look right in the middle where the dragon's breathing, and you'll see the George Bell version of the Lizard Man, like the logo that they used in the very early days of TSR is in there. You've got these guys obviously, getting out their treasure down here. You've got the idol that's from the player's handbook is here from a side view, and then you've got the just our heroes here towards the very front of the drawing. I'm not sure whether I think the castle in the background is the keep on the borderlands or just the castle, but I guess that's up to your imagination. In any event, I think this is just a great piece of art. There's a lot going on. Here's my number one piece of cover art. I don't know how it could not be for me. Here, for once, I go with sort of the conventional wisdom. This is one of my early copies of the Advanced D&D Player's Handbook. I just think this scene is fantastic. You've got the thieves up there. This is after the battle. I just think this was a fantastic piece of art. So that is it for my Artist Spotlight on David Trampier, one of, and for many people, the most important artist from the early era of Dungeons & Dragons. I love his art. I hope you guys have enjoyed this retrospective. If you didn't know his art, I hope you love it now too. Hope you guys have a great day. Hope you're enjoying the videos. Please subscribe to my channel. If you have friends who would like the content, please send them this way, and hopefully they'll subscribe as well. Until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.